Okay, cool. Welcome everyone. Really cool that you're here today. To give you a better experience, I have switched from my Mac to my Linux machine. So let's see how this goes, which has much more memory and hopefully gets us to where we want to go faster. So today I want to do the following. I want to build something like busoverflow.com, which is an Stack Overflow data dashboard backed by Neo4j. So I worked on this last night and I want to see if we can recreate this ourselves today, or how far do we get doing that in the next 60 minutes. Okay, if you followed me so far, you've seen that I set up a Neo4j sandbox as such. So here we have sandbox.neo4j.com. If you want to, you can kind of play along. I'll really quickly run over the initials and then we go into the GraphQL GRANDstack things. So this is a sandbox running since yesterday. I can open browser. It comes with APOC installed. And what I did here yesterday is it's a blank sandbox. I added some data from StackOverflow. So if you Google for APOC and StackOverflow and JSON, you will find this docs page which says load JSON. And in the load JSON docs page, there is an entry for importing data from a StackOverflow API, which I used the past times, and we are using APOC to load this API request here. So if you look at the API request, you see like you get the questions with the tags, the person who posted this question with the reputation, and if a creation date, and if you have answers, there's also like the answer text, answer ID, and also the reputation of the owner and the name of the owner and so on. So that's what we want to import. And fortunately, the APOC docs give us an existing query to do this. So if you want to run this, that's easily doable. And that's what I did. I only fixed two things for you to know. So one is the following. Let's see here. I fixed three things actually. So one is I added created date to the question, which is not in there, and I also added a reputation to the user. So if you see here, we create a user who asked the question, and we set the reputation of the owner to the owner's reputation, what I just showed you in the API, so that we have some data to show. And the other thing is there seems to be one person who answered a question who doesn't exist anymore on Stack Overflow, so who deleted their account. So we have to filter out answers that have a null owner, basically, where the answer.owner ID is null. So we filter them out before we start creating these answers. So if you don't do this, then the current latest 2 pages of Stack Overflow questions, it fails. So it always loads 100 pages. 100 questions, and you can just add page 1 to 3 to answer more. So, and the other thing that I wanted to check is, which I did not fix last night, was the owner of the answer also has a reputation, and I meant to set this on the person as well, but somehow it didn't work. So let's see what we have here. So that's the owner, that's the creation date, and here are answers. Answers have an owner, and the owner has reputation. So actually it should work. That's interesting. Okay, and if I load this, I now have data already in database, but I can, if you want to, we can clean it out real quick. Detach, delete, and so database is empty again, and then we kind of just use this again. And if you run our query here, it creates one page of Stack Overflow data, and then if you change page 2.1 creates the second page of StackOverflow data. So we should have a bunch of things, and most of our users or all of our users should have reputation set. So you see that they all have a reputation now as well. So users have reputation, display name and an ID, and questions have an ID, favorite count, and title, and created as a date time, which is what we are interested in today. So to get started with GRANDstack and the whole shebang, I already showed this last time, but my last session was really not so good, so I want to recreate the initials, and then we can take it from there. So because it's only like a small bus overflow version, I just call it bus overflow with one C or Z. We just run npx create GRANDstack app bus overflow, and it will npm will install the other half of the internet, and while it's doing that, we can look what we do for that. So if you want to learn more about the GRANDstack starter, you can go just to grandstack.io, and there is the GRANDstack starter, and if you click on get started, it talks about the GRANDstack starter, explains the architecture and the details of the bits and pieces that you need here. And Will has a really nice video that shows how to use it and also how to deploy it to Netlify, and let's see how far we get in that today. Okay, so it's basically an app with two modules. One is the backend API, which is in GraphQL API, and the other one is the frontend, which is in React app. There's also an Angular version, but I don't know Angular, even less than I know React. So it's what we will look at. So by the way, warning ahead, I'm not JavaScript noob, so my JavaScript skills are still from the 90s, and so this will be fun. So it's still downloading the internet, so now that gets interesting. So it asks me for our connection strings. So if you go to Sandbox, we actually can pick up these details from the Sandbox. So we say it has connection details, so we copy the bold URL. Here you go. We don't want to have encrypted because we have a sandbox. Neo4j is our user, and the password is college rinse curves. So as you know, sandbox is just around for a few days, and there's no critical data in this one, so you can watch me doing that. And so it now created like the two things. So if I do if I enter the directory bus overflow, then you see we have an API directory here and an web React directory here, and that's what we're gonna work on. So we open it in VS Code, and there is one thing that we just with the information that we gave to the starter, it created an end file in API, which basically now has this information for us, right? So Neo4j URL, user, and the password, and it hosts the GraphQL server on localhost 4001/GraphQL. So that means if you do npm or yarn run start, it will basically run the GraphQL API and the React API. So here we have basically our GraphQL API. If we reload this page, and what's really nice is it serves our schema, and also we get like docs for the schema and the schema itself. So something that the starter doesn't do, which might be a little bit confusing for you, is that it has already a predefined schema and predefined React components. So it's actually for Yelp-like ratings app, or Yelp-like ratings background, so for a Yelp database. But we have a different database. So we have two options here. So for once, GRANDstack can do something like this. Where's GRANDstack here? There is inferring a schema. this? Auto generation, inferring schemas, infer. Yeah, I want to go there. There. So basically you can call a function called infer schema, which will then go into your database and infer the schema. So you can create an npm command that does infer schema and writes it to a file. So all the stuff is documented here. I won't go into this. So I will promise that he will add this to the GRANDstack starter. So I don't bother to do this now. I will just do a neat trick, which is we just let Will's integration of GraphQL for the sandbox do the work for us. So we just say deploy to code sandbox, and this will deploy an GraphQL API to code sandbox for us, which has all the stuff, runs the GraphQL API here against our database, and then we can just see this up and running. And what's really cool, it also does infer schema for us, so we can just steal different schema from here. So I don't know why it has problems connecting to the gateway, but we don't really need. Oh, here it is. Right, so we can now query this here if we wanted to say question title. Then we can get all the questions in the database, right, which is like 200 now. But we don't need the code sandbox. But if you want to play around without installing Node or without downloading all dependencies and just having a GraphQL API for your sandbox, I really recommend you to try this out. Okay, so we have our schema now, which is good. And the other thing that we just take this and replace the current schema JSON file. A schema GraphQL file, which is this, with ours. Please take into account that it has a top-level mutation and query field here with some stuff. So I'll, for the time being, I leave that alone. But we'll get back to those later. Right? Of course, it's interesting for us as well. So, okay, we probably need to comment them out, so, or we can just write them later. Doesn't matter. Okay, that means we can just reload our GraphQL API, which hopefully should come online really soon. And then we should be able now to see our new docs. Let's see. Does this work? Or didn't it like me? That's my terminal. Did I kill my terminal? Actually, no. This is the terminal. I don't want to see OBS right now. So, so it complains about the schema here. Does it recompile the? No, so we just restart this. Expected : found name tag. So it's wrong one. This is the right one. So we have username. Oh, we have user twice in here. Of course, that's the old user from the old schema that I didn't delete. That explains it. Okay, back in the game. now we have our GraphQL API, so we can, for instance, find all questions in their titles. And let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it better. And then we say first 3, and then you see the first 3 questions, and we can say then users, and users have a display name. So that these are the people that ask the questions. And then if you have like people that posted answers, and the answers have a user again, so people that answer these questions as well. So and of course you want it pretty, or we just prettify this query and run it. So these, most of these have no answers. Let's see, first 10. So here's for instance one. Is here one? No answers. No answers. No answers. No answers. That's really weird. Probably because it's delayed lost questions from just today. Okay, anyway, so what you're also interested in, what I said, is favorite count, and for the users, the reputation. And you see that reputation is missing because the infer schema didn't see this on our users. So we can just say reputation int and add it to our user, which will rebuild our schema. And if I rerun this, it should show us the reputation of users. Nice. And also created as the date should be there. It is not, but we can add it to the question as well, and it's called created date time. So that's the Neo4j date time. So it's a custom scalar. Oh yeah, and because it's a complex data type, we can say we want to have this as formatted. Oops, sorry, in the query net, of course, not here. So in our schema, we define the schema, and here we say created you want to see the formatted date. So we get the formatted date here. Okay, that's kind of what we want to look with our GraphQL API today. So cool. If you have any questions, just ping me. I'll look at the chat infrequently. So, okay, so that's our GraphQL background, which kind of already works now, which is really nice. And now let's look at the React app. That's localhost 3000, and if you open this, it has errors all over the place, right? So nothing works here. So because it's the wrong data model, and we have to fix stuff to make it work. So that's why let's go to VS Code, go to the app, and of course it's not welcome to GRANDstack, but it's welcome to StackOverflow. Most important thing to change, and then basically we can look at the components. So this component here, the users list, is the first thing that we look at. Users list, which is this here, is basically a search field in a table, and it uses use query from React hooks. So it uses from Apollo's React hooks, so it doesn't use the older approaches, but move to React hooks already. So okay, what do we want to do? We want to change the GraphQL query, right? So so we have our what do we want to show? Actually, we want to show users, right? So we want to show user with offset first order by filter, and then we want to show the ID. We don't have another ID, but we want to rename name display name to name. And we don't have average starts, but we have favorite count, and we don't have number of reviews. So this is our GraphQL query, which we could already run. if you wanted to in our API, in our GraphQL API, we just have to provide the parameters. So if you do this here, it complains about like the reputation. See, found already first issue. So these are our users with the reputation. So we can actually fix this here real quick. And you also see that it renames the display name to a name field here, which is really nice. Okay. Chris asks if the schema can be changed at runtime. So the GraphQL query can be changed at runtime, but the schema is something that's provided by the GraphQL API as such. So what we do in Neo4j GraphQL Java is we hook into the Apollo GraphQL server, and provide resolvers for the top-level queries, as you can see here in the playground. If you look at the schema, the docs, we generate a bunch of queries for the top-level entities, like tag, answer, user question, which is also configurable. So which ones do we want to have? And also a bunch of mutations, which is also configurable, basically to add and delete data. And at the same time, you can also add your own resolvers as well. So if you have very, very custom code, then you can have your own top-level queries and own top-level mutations. You can also override resolvers for certain fields. So for instance, if you want to have a computed field somewhere, then you can do this. And in the API, that means in the API project, you can also modify this GraphQL schema that's used at runtime as well. But from the front end, usually you don't do this. So you usually either pull data from different GraphQL APIs, or you just change the queries accordingly, right? Because the API is really an API that's meant to be used like that. But it's pretty powerful. I'll show you in a second what we can actually do here, right? For instance, if you wanted to have something like let me do this now. Here's our schema. Is this the right one? Yeah. So for instance, if you want to have a number of answers, to say so, right? Answer count int. What you can do here is you can just do a cipher directive. This is a custom directive that we added, and we just say actually we don't have to match. Actually, we can just say return size of this and then provided answers. So provided as answer count. You can return anything here. I just give it a name. And that's a statement. So that means whenever we include this field into our GraphQL query, it will use this field. It will add this cipher fragment to the generated cipher query. And if I didn't misspell anything, like missing a closing brace here, then this should already work. So if I now go to my API, it should have pre-built and refreshed, and I say answer count, then it shows me how many answers this person provided. So these people didn't provide any answers, right? Except for Sam. Oh, who had actually should have provided a lot of answers. Why doesn't it show? Size of this to provided direction. Oh, this user provided. Good question. Either our data doesn't have the information right now, but you see that it's at least computing something, right? So I don't know what's going on there. You can change this to asked. For instance, question count, for instance, come on. Sorry, my touchpad hangs on Linux, and I have not figured out how to fix that. So, and this is of course now question count. Oh, and here you see question count is actually computed correctly, right? So how many questions did this person ask here? Okay, cool. Thank you, Chris. So now we have basically in the user list, we fixed this query. So we have the display name, the reputation, and the ID. And there are two other things that we have to fix. So one is there's something weird going on, so that for sorting we need to use the original field name and not the alias. So that's something that might need to be fixed. And then the other thing is that we need to remove this one row in this one column that has. So this is not average stars, but this is reputation. So we just change this here. And oops, should have added all occurrences. So we don't need num reviews, so we just table so. And then for this is the header, right? So this is reputation as well. And so that's the header, and then for each field it gets the name of the response, and here it's reputation. And number of reviews, we don't need this. So, and here for sort request, we also need to do display name, because it kind of uses that as a sort parameter. By the way, sort works like this. So if I do here an order by on user, I basically can pass in an ordering, so which is then by the way, if you want to provide variables for these fields here, then we can do it here. So I can say, for instance, order by, and then for instance, display name ascending or descending, and then it should run this. And then you see that like the names are in reverse order, and if I use ascending, then it's in a first order. Right? So that's what it uses in the React component as well. So if we go back to our React component here for users, it now actually works. It doesn't error anymore, which is really cool. So we can also, sorting should also work. So it runs a new query for these, right? So you see that some people have quite a lot of reputation, and you can also do the sorting by name. Cool. If I do user contains here, then it should also find people with the component. So basically the search component changes the filter. So there's a search field here which says handle filter change, and on handle filter change it basically sets the state to the new value, so it gets the value from the text field and sets filter state to that, and then when it actually runs the query, it uses get filter for the filter, and it takes the from the state the value whatever you put in, and then it uses that. So name contains filter state. So you could also say name starts with or something like that. So then it would be here, for instance, name starts with. Then it should only do, if you do an U or an, let's say, K, it's not starts with. We need to reload it. No, I broke it. I just changed back to contains. So in the GRANDstack docs, there's also for the augmentation, the info schema, GraphQL schema design. So filtering. Yeah, and filtering is name contains, and should be a list hopefully of, yeah. Title starts with, so should be, oh, it should be actually display name contains. So where's our, okay. So now we should also be able to say starts with. So for instance, if we now say A, it should only have things, people that have an A, right? There's also a case insensitive version of that as well. Okay, so we fixed the user list, so that works. So what's open now is the dashboard. So that dashboard is all arrows here, right? And so there's an easy component that we start with, is kind of just the number of users. So there's an user count component, which is super simple. It just does one GraphQL query, user count, and shows this. So that's something that we can add for a schema. So as I said before, we had this type query that I deleted, and it had one query, which is user count int. And we just use a cipher directive again, statement, and we say match user return count star. And that's it already. And so this should fix our total users. Cool. First component fixed. So the second one is this one, which is a little bit more involved because it wants to show a bar chart of frequencies. So if you look at the it's called ratings chart component. I won't rename it now, but you can imagine that it's actually should be called reputation component, also reputation chart, right? So this is called ratings count, and it has stars and count. And let's just do a query that returns something like this, even if we know that actually should be reputation count here. So we go back to our schema and say, okay, let's create such a query. Ratings count, and this actually, as you saw, this returns two fields, right? So we need to have an type to hold stars and count here. So we can just create a type called ratings count, which has stars int and count int. And what we want to do is we want to find all users. So this returns a list of ratings count, right? And we again do just a cipher statement. Of course, that's what I can do best. And you can also use triple quotes to make it more readable. So we have our users. We aggregate the reputation in steps of 100. So this does kind of just truncate 100 and then times 100 as stars count as count. Actually, we just don't need this. We can just return this. So this gives us like in steps of 100 how many people have this many stars, right? So, and this should already be it. So we can should be able to use the ratings chart. If you look at how this works, it's basically using again use query from React hooks, and then use query from React hook, so where we provide our query. This is our GraphQL query, so we should actually now be able to run this GraphQL query against our API. Let's do this. So we can run this query against our API, and it complains about long 100 of long value is not. Oh right, I remember. So it's we can't return them as such, but we have to return an object for these. So let's use the with actually, and then so it looks a bit clearer, and then we just return basically a map with stars and count as ratings. Right. Actually, we can put in whatever here because it just takes the first computations. Right? So let's try this again, and now it works. So this is our overview of like counts by. So if you wanted to sort this, we could also, of course, then say order by stars descending, and if you rerun this, it should give us the stars in descending order, right? So you see these, it's a power law distribution already, right? So, and if you look at our component again, it should now hopefully work, and we see the power law distribution of the ratings, right? So we have many people with 0 ratings, a few with 100, and then it goes this way. So we could also flip it around if you wanted to make it ascending or resort it in the UI. That's also possible, of course. Right. Probably nicer like this. Okay, so the ratings chart works like this. We do the GraphQL query. With the results of the query we use on the rendering component. If there's an error here from use query, then we show error, otherwise we show loading. So we've already seen the error, we've also seen the loading. And then it's just a simple bar chart component that just takes the rating counts as data, and the key is, where's it? Here, data key count. Data ratings count is the response. If you look at the GraphQL API here, ratings count is what comes back from our query here, right? And then inside of ratings count we have stars as the x-axis and count as the y-axis here, right? And that's basically it. And then we render this. So it's pretty simple to take data from GraphQL API and render it as components as such. The third component that's broken here is the is a recent users list, recent questions list. So there's a recent reviews list actually. So it's because, as you remember, it was the Yelp review application. So if you want to change this, then we can say this is actually a question field, question query. Order by is created descending. We have username, business name. We don't have business name, but we have the date, which is created. And we don't have a text, but we have a title, and we have a favorite count. So if you run this in our API, this should hopefully work. Let's see. Okay, it complains about the field user. Why does it complain about the field user? Let's see, what does our schema look like? Where is question users? So it's plural here because in first schema didn't know about cardinality, so it didn't actually know that question. Remember, we didn't write this by hand, so it's all from input schema, right? So we don't know that a single user posts a question. So we just simplify this to a singular relationship, so one-to-one relationship, n-to-one relationship. So we have only one user per question. And this should be already enough to run this query. And of course, it's display name for user. Right. So this renders our query. And I just thought we could actually say how many answers or which which tags does the query have as a field here, right? So let's use this query as our query in the component. So we get back to our recent reviews component, which I should rename at some point. And now we have our question, first 10, order by created descending, we display the display name, we show the tags, created date as formatted, title and favorite count, and now we just need to change the questions, change the table. So date, business name is actually tags, username is, so this is title, username is the same, and then review stars is basically favorite count. Right? Okay, cool. So row, it gets our, this is not review anymore, this is question, because you see that it uses the field name of the query for this. If you want to have something different, we would have to alias this. So if you say here, for instance, Q, then it would use Q instead, right? Or if I were to just cheat and put review in there, then it would use review, which you don't want to do. So I just use question, and then for each question it goes over the row, shows the date, shows the tags, and then which is an array of name, so we get the names for the tags. We have the username because we renamed it up here from display name to name. So that should be fine. And text is title. And then instead of stars, we have favorite count. Probably we also want to rename this to favorite count in JavaScript. Okay, so this should be hopefully it. Let's see if our component here works again, if it breaks. No, I broke something. So it's a row tags map name. So let's see. Oh, it's tagged. Let's change this to tags. Yay! Cool. So this is not sortable right now, but we see this is our date, this is our I should probably do a join on this. So here we see the tags, the username who asked the question, the title, and how many favorites does this question have yet. Cool, so we fixed our stuff here, and we have 15 more minutes. What I wanted to do is something that is not in the starter, is actually on this dashboard here. I want to upvote certain questions in my database, right? So naively, we would just add a button here. So we would add an upvote cell here, basically. Say here. Actions. And then here we would say just oops. We put a table cell in here, and here we put in a button. And the button has a title called upvote. And on click something that I just stole from the sorting headers in the user list. So it should actually render a button if we add I think the button here from material API. So let's see if does this compiled. See, button. Here's our upvote button. Cool. So it doesn't do anything yet. If I click on it, nothing happens. Right. So we just steal the code from user list a little bit. So there is an on-click thing for the headers, and instead of handle sort request, we want to upvote our query questions. So you would say row.id and have a function called upvote, right? So, and then we just say const upvote is we get an ID, and then we say just console.log ID. So okay, reloading this, and if we switch to the console and click upvote, just clear this. It says undefined. Undefined is not good. Why is it undefined? Here's row ID is the key. What did I do wrong? Oh, we don't return an ID. That's a good point, actually. So, sorry. Okay, if we now click on any of these upvote buttons, it shows us an ID, which should be something we could be using in a mutation. We haven't talked about mutations yet. So mutations are the GraphQL way of updating data. So here we had a query, and we can also create mutations. Mutation. So which is automatically added to our schema, which is cool. We can't call it upvote. By the way, the stuff that I'm writing here in Cypher, usually you would write in JavaScript, right? So you would get a Neo4j driver instance, create a session, run a statement, and so on. But I want to show you how to do it just directly. But of course, if you want to extend this in the back end, then you can. Then you would just go in the GraphQL and in make augmented schema and add here your own schema things basically to it. Right? So here it reads schema, and then basically here in make augmented schema you can pass in your own GraphQL field resolvers as well. Additionally, so there's also documentation in GRANDstack how to do this. Okay, but we wanted to upvote. So we have a mutation. So mutations basically take parameters and do something. So our mutation takes an ID, which is an int in our case, and returns a question. And the actual implementation of our mutation is just a self statement, which is basically match question ID. So parameters of mutations and also queries are automatically made available to self statement as parameters as well. Favorite. No, I don't want to install the update now. Favorite count +1. And of course this is q dot, and this is statement. So we have a question, and then we increment the favorite count and return the question again, which is, it should actually return it actually. Otherwise it doesn't like us. Return q. Right. So that's our mutation. It should be automatically added to our API. So that means we can just steal one of these IDs here, and in the playground we should, so this is not a query anymore, but we can just say this is a mutation, and the mutation is called upward. We pass in an ID, which is this. Oops. I thought it copied the ID. Let's try this again. Come on, you can do it. Copy message, playground, paste message. And then here we can return the ID, the title, and the favorite count. So network error. Let's see, it doesn't like us anymore. Why it doesn't like us? Found name question. Okay, type mutation. Returns a question as a colon. Okay. Cool. So if we now run this, it increments the favorite count in this entry. And actually, if we look in the database itself, it's also favorite count 4, right? So it actually worked. Cool. So that means we can now change our recent reviews here to add the mutation. But we can't use query, but we need to use mutation from Apollo React hooks. Use mutation. So Will sent me a really nice article for that from Apollo React hooks, and with an example that we just gonna steal, which is this one. So if you go to Apollo GraphQL and search for use mutation, then you'll find it. We can also paste it into the notes as well. And what we can do now is basically get a function here that we can use for the mutation. So basically we say steal this, and instead of our original console log version, we just say upward here, and this is the result. And use mutation is our GQL text string, which is actually, let's do a constant. Upvote up, because it gets a little bit more involved, because you have to pass the parameter in. So we basically steal this and call it call it upvote query, and then basically this is upvote ID. Sorry, this is a mutation. Upvote ID is an int, and we do upvote ID, and we return basically the ID and the new favorite count basically from this for this query. So and then it uses the upvote thing here. So, and something that it last time I tried it did automatically is it actually used the data that got back for re-rendering. So let's see if this still works. So if we go back here to our thing, it complains about something. So we imported use mutation from React hooks. We have our upvote query. And here we have upvote for that. Does it still complain? Yeah. Oh, right. Here, it has to be $ID as a parameter in the query here. Okay, cool. So if I now click upvote on these here, they are not doing that. Oh yeah, I remember. So if you look at the Apollo example, here's the Apollo example. It actually puts here is the full variables field that's passed to the. It's the full variables field that's passed to this function, to this Apollo function, because it's now an Apollo function. And so variables is the GraphQL variables thing from basically from here. Variables, what you put in here would go into that. So it would be basically here variables ID, which is JSON ID, and then our ID here. And then we could use this basically here, and then we say upvote ID int, and if you make it prettier, so this is our definition of our GraphQL query mutation with parameters, and then here inside of the query we can use the parameters, and if I run this, then it use that. And down here this this JSON is basically the query parameters that are passed to the query. Okay, so we did this, and now it should actually work. And you see that it's basically updating these. Cool. So the last step in our journey in the last few minutes is that we can add this to GitHub and to Netlify. So basically what I can say is here hub init, and then hub create a GitHub repository, and then we can just git start status So env file should not be. So if I look at git ignore, so the env file is actually excluded, and we should probably also ignore the VS Code. Directory. Yep. Initial commit bus overflow. Okay, git push. I thought it updated the upstream. Or hub push. Let's see. Okay, so now I have it on GitHub. So actually with 1C. So this is the new one from just now. Right, so this is our project with all this stuff. I didn't update the README, of course, right? So, but you see it. And then basically what we can do is we just go to Netlify here and say we want to deploy a new site from GitHub authorized, and then we want to deploy, let me see, no, I actually want to, because I didn't give it access to everything, here. So, and select repositories, and I just want to select bus overflow, this one, save. Okay, and now we see our new one, which is this one. And you see that kind of this is built in from master, the build commands it already picked up, and then in at once we have to add 3 new variables, which is Neo4j URI, Neo4j user, Neo4j, and Neo4j password. And these 3 we just copy from Sandbox, which kind of went away over here. So it's college rinse curves. So the UI is this one, and college rinse curve or curves. So, and then we say deploy site. And Netlify pulls our stuff from GitHub, does the deployment, and then we have our new domain, new bus overflow site up and running. Cool. Deploy in progress. Currently building. And here's our site. And just takes a few seconds in a video. Any questions from anyone? The directory is there. I just used GRANDstack starter. Have the load JSON. I have just the StackOverflow stuff. Here's the GRANDstack starter project video. And this is a new tab. This is the other, no, this is the, this is my other repository, but actually the one from today is this one with 1C on my repository. GRANDstack docs is really useful to look at. This is the other side, and I was just looking for something for domain configuration, which I figured out. And then docs for GRANDstack starter, and this is our local app that we can close now. So, and now Netlify hopefully is done. Come on. You saw locally how much it had to pull from the internet. So cool. Yeah, so if you have anything else, something I want to do from next time on Twitch is kind of to expose some bits of APOC and see what cool things you can do with the APOC library and such. Okay, and if Netlify finishes the deployment, then we can see our site active here. Deploying your site. Does the production build of it. Bunch of warnings. Packaging. Oh, it basically packages them as AWS Lambda functions to site, and then they're available, yeah. See, it supports Node, Python, Emacs, Maven, and Go. And I don't know if this is Spring Boot or Boot is in general. Site is live. It says site is live. So let's see where my site is live. There's my site. There's my site. We did it. So this is what we worked on, live and in color. And you see it's StackOverflow with 1C, not with double C. All set. That's it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a question or drop us a question in the Neo4j community site or on Slack as well, in the GraphQL. So there's a GraphQL and GRANDstack category here. So feel free to drop any questions here. Or if you have suggestions for new topics for Twitch, feel free to reach out as well. Okay, cool. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye bye.